not very taken seriously. But I don't know how much of that has to do with my age or
And you're how old are you?
I'm 25,
Okay.
or my gender or
Mm-hmm.
the fact that I don't have advanced education. It could be a lot of factors.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's an interesting question. I really treasure the elders in my life, and I feel like I have really good intergenerational relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so overall, I think I have
Right.
I've had good experiences with people who are older than my generation.
Right. Right.
Maybe not great experiences with men, but
Right.
that's not all about age.
You're right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
What do you? What about you? What do you think? Would you be a baby boomer? Is that your
I'm a baby boomer. I'm at the tail end of the baby boomers.
Yeah.
I'll be 62 in June,
Okay.
and it would be. I feel like I'm a bridge between millennials and baby
Mhm.
boomers. I have friends who are in their 70s and 80s, and I have friends in their 20s and 30s. So uh, it is. It's also, I think, coupled with how society is just becoming less respectful and less civil.
Mm.
So it's not always, like you say, it's not always about just one thing. It could be a variety of factors and stuff like that. And I just kind of see people becoming just just less, polite to each other, and that just
Interesting.
like makes a big difference in
Yeah.
just terms of being able to communicate. You can't communicate with anyone if you're not even civil with them. And so a lot of the work that we do with the theater is about helping people have conversations. People coming from radically different perspectives being able to have civilized conversations. So our mission is to help America heal from the wounds of slavery without shame or blame. And every time we do any kind of theatrical presentation, uh, it ends with a conversation with the audience, so they can talk about this difficult history in ways that are helpful. And, so watching, just kind of the age, in terms of how people react and everything like that, it's really, everybody's pretty much the same.
Yeah.
They want to be, heard and to be able to speak their truth,
Yeah.
and no one can argue with that. And if we can try to get to that, then that's, a good day's work,
Yeah.
you know. So, but did you bring the history facts or anything like that? Would you happen to have?
I have my computer so I can pull them up
Okay.
in my email account.
Right. Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
That'd be.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. I guess what we would be doing today, so I wasn't sure how to prepare. But
Right,
yeah.
right, right. Understood. And at this point, what we're gonna do, we're gonna like share the screen a little bit, and I wanted to read an article, an editorial, and just kind of have you respond to it and have a conversation about it.
I'm having a hard time pulling it up on my computer.
Okay,
but
take your time.
I'm gonna do it on my phone if that's okay. Will anybody else be joining us today?
I don't think so. We're having that conversation earlier. We're in here like every day for almost like a month back in the fall doing the various projects we're working on it. And then we kind of took a break and we're just kind of getting back to like full steam, this past week in terms of like, we were basically our hours were here Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday from noon to 4.
Okay.
And but as we kind of gear up for the spring and summer, that's going to change in terms of the hours that we're going to be here. We're going to be a lot of energy is going to be focused on a play series called Summers in Suffolk. The amphitheater where we were yesterday. That's where we're going to do the production.
Okay. In Suffolk.
It's actually in Portsmouth. Actually, it's called Portsmouth City Park, but the play is called Summers in Suffolk.
Okay.
Just to confuse everyone, right? And that'll go into rehearsals right after 4th of July, and then have performances at the end of August.
Okay. Very cool.
But right now we are gearing up. We're about not less than 90 days away from the Juneteenth festival time, which generally is June 19th.
Mhm.
And but we use the whole month of June, as kind of do activities and events and so forth like that. And because of the virus this year, it's all over the map in terms of
Yeah.
what's going to be happening and so forth like that. And a couple weeks ago, I was looking at this weekend as being kind of like our official kickoff and announcement about what we were going to be doing and so forth like that. But, things have conspired to,
Yeah.
be flexible,
For
and
sure.
I'm so glad we were talking because, doing the count, like I said, we've been trying to get the calendar for forever.
Yeah.
And so this is a good amount of time, I think, to be able to get started and to be able to have it ready for June.
For June.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah, right.
Ooh, okay.
That was the thought. So this is kind of like wanted to kind of like
Okay.
talk with you about to strategize and see if it's possible, because I was talking about an 18-month calendar and maybe it already needs to be a 12-month calendar,
Yeah.
just to kind of be doable in terms of making sure that we can, get it the way that we want it to be.
For sure.
So maybe right away, let's make an executive decision that we're talking about a 12-month calendar.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I
So,
guess we can. I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, now that I'm thinking about it, it doesn't have to be 100% done up on every dimension the first time. I guess we can try one
Mhm.
year and see what
Mhm.
works and what doesn't, and then
Mhm.
scale
Mhm.
up the next.
Definitely. After not having it for like 2 decades, we can just kind of like ease our way into
For
it.
sure. I'm the kind of person that really likes to dot every
Are you?
I and T
Okay,
before I even.
Oh, I'm
get
gonna drive you
started.
crazy
Yeah.
then.
Well, it's perfect. It's balance.
So yeah, I guess you have to figure out what calendar, what we want it to be
Mhm.
and all that kind of stuff like that, is kind of like the first step there. But
Yeah.
let me just do this here in terms of, I want to read this editorial that was in the Virginia Pilot.
Okay.
And Darlene, I want you to listen to it because I want to get some feedback from you too in terms of what you think about it, okay?
Okay.
All right. I'm going to take off my mask to read this. Okay, as I was saying, I wanted to be able to share this letter to the editor that was appeared in to Friday's paper yesterday, Friday, April 9th. Friday, April 9th, the title of the essay is Appomattox. 156 years ago today, Confederate General Robert E. Lee surrendered the Army of Northern Virginia to Union General Ulysses S. Grant, essentially ending the Civil War of 1861 to 1865. That war was especially bloody and took the lives of approximately 700,000 Americans. President Abraham Lincoln and Grant met prior to April 9, 1865, and discussed the terms of a potential surrender. Lincoln did not want to punish the Confederates and suggested forgiving terms. Confederate soldiers could return to their homes and resume their lives. There were no advisors, media, lawyers, or committees involved, just two men representing competing factions doing what was right to unite a divided country. Lee mentioned he had roughly 1,000 Union prisoners he could not feed and had no food for his own troops. Grant provided 25,000 rations. Grant commented, "The Confederates were now our countrymen, and we did not want to exult over their downfall." Later, Grant and Lee walked among the Confederate troops and sat together on the porch of the McLean House and visited with officers on both sides. The surrender of arms and equipment was peaceful. They made peace then. Why can't we make peace now? And this was written by a gentleman, Robert N. Holt and Franklin. I'd wanted to be able to acknowledge this anniversary because I think it's one of the most important events in American history. And we often, almost never look at Appomattox in terms of the significance of the surrender. But really, Appomattox is how Juneteenth actually got its beginning, because after the surrender, you had Union troops who, on horseback, spread out across the country, spreading the news that slavery had been abolished. And wherever they went, there would be a holiday, some type of event, Independence Day, Victory Day, Emancipation Day. And when they got to Galveston, Texas on June 19th, because of the date on the calendar, that celebration became known as Juneteenth. And now Juneteenth is the generic term meaning to celebrate the end of slavery in America. And it is recognized as a resolution or a proclamation or even a state a law in all 50 states. It's now an official state holiday in 4 states. That would be Texas, where it started, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, most recently in the last year, and Virginia also in the last year. So we are the first southern state beyond Texas to have a Juneteenth state holiday. And Virginia also became in 2020 the first southern state to ban the death penalty. And so what happens here in Virginia in regards to American history is critical to understanding the nature of who we are as a nation. And this letter to the editor, for me, is really quite telling in that the writer of this is talking about, how the Confederates were, forgiven for, what had happened in terms of their treason against the nation. And here we are 156 years later, and we have an insurrection that's happening. And do we do the same thing? Do we forgive them for their misguided actions? Or do they have to pay the price for treason? They didn't have to pay the price for treason 156 years ago, and perhaps that's why we are still dealing with the issue of treason. So I'm wanting to just kind of get some feedback from folks in terms of your thoughts about the surrender. Where does it stand in your mind in terms of importance, or is it not important? And we've got Darlene and Louisa,
Mhm.
okay, here today, and wanted to get some comments from you ladies, if you would share with us. Well, Louisa, we'll start with you.
That's okay with you, darling? Yeah. Well, I guess I was interested in how he concluded his essay, like the question, why can't we just do what they did
Right.
now?
Mm-hmm.
Because the conflict that he's talking about is between 2 white generals, but the conflict in play right now is not between 2 white generals.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The conflict that I assume he's alluding to is between like people who are rising up for Black liberation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.